Ladies and gentlemen, Dead by Daylight's 2v8 mode is back, and I couldn't be happier. I knew they'd give us a second helping of 2v8 after the massive praise it got last time. There have been some tweaks since August, but what's different this time around? Well, to cut to the chase, I mostly support the new changes. Mostly. We've got a lot to discuss. Firstly, the 2v8 launch seems to be free of any obvious bugs, unlike last time where huge parts of the map were missing and you could be trapped in a hook and oh dear. Well, it is Sable Ward, so she probably likes the mad goth tart, but then, well. That's a hell of a perk you've got there, Ash. Did Claudette teach you?
I know this looks bad.
I don't know if this is bad connection, but fortunately this is the only match I've had that's this, and I suppose it wouldn't be Dead by Daylight without something going wrong. Secondly, I'm still strongly in favour of tunnelling out that one guy who doesn't ready up. I don't know what's going on here though. Tunnel each other. Thirdly, I still love stealing items owing to the fact I'm British. That's just a little thrill for me and it never gets old. The 4 survivor classes I explored last time are making a return with new revisions, along with 4 classes for the killers: Shadow, Brute, Enforcer and Fearmonger. I hope 2v8 won't get too complicated in the future and we can avoid a bloated mess, but as it stands it seems simple and reasonable enough. Although I am interested in the killer classes as well as the 3 new killers hunting us, Blight Spirit and Deathslinger, there's a problem. A classic problem. Welcome home. I'm really not sure what to do about this. Maybe playing Survivor gives the player special points that allow them to queue for killer? Everyone starts with a certain amount, but you spend them to queue for the role everyone wants. This would force everyone to play at least a bit more Survivor and clear up the queues. But I know that's a controversial idea, and if you have another idea, I'm all ears. I really want to play more killer myself, but I'm not sure if that's happening. Although at least it's not 450% this time around. And why is that, I wonder? I'm not a fan of the new change of having to pick up a survivor to cage them for either side. It brings the action to a screeching halt and the animation looks amateurish. Was this an attempt to make the killer's side less appealing, thus alleviating the queues? I've talked about that dim approach before. Or maybe it's to revive flashlights you might plunder from a chest. I've never been a fan of flashlights, they're irritating. I think the cage stomp should return and flashlights just be removed from 2v8 mode entirely. Either way, I'm not playing much killer again. No matter though, I'm first and foremost a Survivor main, and so this video will mostly be focusing on our revised 4 Survivor classes. I'm once again asking which class is the best. I'll give a quick overview followed by a much more in-depth look for anyone still watching. Let's get to work. The pseudo-perks, as I called them last time, of the Survivor classes are officially called skills, but each of the 4 classes now has 3 skills as opposed to 4. A nerf? Not quite, and a nerf would be very foolish if they wanted to incentivize more survivors. This is more a redistribution. Firstly, all survivors have Unbreakable as base kit, meaning they can recover from the dying state. Better still, survivors can use it as many times as they want as opposed to it only being available on death hook like last time, or even only once as with Bill Overbeck. At least, I think they do. I've never actually had a chance to try it. Like before, I don't think this will come into play too often, but it'll make slugging an unviable long or even medium-term strategy. and thus one of DBD's worst mechanics is nullified. I think... Did this get scrapped and no one told me? But more significantly, all class abilities come with a charge-type secondary effect that is not too dissimilar to what I postulated for the guide last time, thank you very much. For ease of understanding, I'll tag this as the charge class skill to make documenting them more digestible. There might only be 3 skills, but multiple pseudo-perks are tied up within the same skill. It's not very user-friendly, and you'll see soon enough. But best of all 4 survivor classes now have different unlockable skills, as opposed to all 4 having the reimagined self-guard as I called it last time. These new unlockable skills are available after enduring only one hook/cage state, even if they're a bit... well... let's catch up with our awesome foursome. The Escapist. Pseudo-perks available are Infectious Super Sprint Burst, Triggered Reimagined Quick and Quiet, Nerfed Windows of Opportunity, and Emergency Self-Care. Infectious Sprint Burst, the Escapist's signature skill, is the same as before, giving yourself and everyone around you a haste effect for 3 seconds that stacks with other instances of this occurring, and it only costs a 20-second exhaustion penalty. The Quick and Quiet variant is an interesting addition, charging over 30 seconds to give you and everyone nearby silenced rush actions for a little bit. It's tricky to get value out of on behalf of others, but you can still use it. The Windows of Opportunity variant reveals pallets and vaults at a 16-meter range rather than 32-meter range, but as of late 2024 meta, WOO is still a respected perk and it'll still come in handy. The unlockable for the Escapist class is a self-care variant, a boring final choice, and it has very limited use when you consider the buffed medics on your team who will see you and silently disapprove. The Escapist has lost the revival made for this pseudo-perk, but I think it's for the best. The class is still fun, and there'll be no shortage of them in the lobbies. The Guide. Pseudo-perks available are Reimagined Technician come Better Together, Back Pocket Prove Thyself, Boosted Visionary come Deja Vu, and Collective Hyper Specialist thing. Reimagined Technician / Better Together is the same as it was before, except under one pseudo-perk. Gen repairs for you and everyone nearby are quieter, and everyone nearby still gets that 3% additional progress for great skill checks on gens. And, when working on a generator, you are highlighted to nearby friendlies. Back Pocket Prove Thyself is one hell of a boost to gen repair that can be activated after 90 seconds to give everyone nearby faster repairing. Boosted Visionary now reveals unfinished generator auras at 32-meter range instead of 16, which was a change I proposed last time, so TYVM. It's still not terribly powerful, but it is handy, I suppose. As a bonus, you can also see the auras of the 4 generators closest to each other at infinite range to try and prevent any 4-genning scenarios similar to Deja Vu. Collective Hyper Specialist thing is a rusher's delight. There isn't a base perk quite like it. After being caged/hooked once, you'll henceforth gain a boost upon generator completion for every survivor nearby, and that boost is applied to the next generator you repair. The guide is much better than last time, but it's still rather boring, I'd say. You pretty much just repair non-stop, and don't be surprised if killers target you first to prevent the rushing. The Medic. Pseudo-perks available are Healing Leader meets Enforced Iron Will, Reimagined Autodidact but Ranged and Crazy, Rip-Off Empathy, and Reimagined Reverse Babysitter meets Reimagined Reversed Empathic Connection. The healing speed boost given to nearby teammates from Healing Leader is up from 25% to 50%, and the range is up from 3 meters to a full 8 meters. Again, this is similar to what I asked for. It also suppresses nearby grunts of pain in what I can only imagine is the medic telling everyone to shut up. It also still reveals the heal target's aura to nearby friendlies, promoting the faster reset style I talked about in the previous video. Your personal heal speed is up to 50% from 35% via a different pseudo perk last time. The very strange autodidact-esque timed skill requires 120 seconds but will shave off 50% healing for you and anyone around you, and can stack with other instances. Empathy is still empathy, and I stand by my view that it's underrated and you should accept the calling wherever possible. The self-babysitter / self-empathic connection suppresses scratch marks when injured after you've suffered one cage state, and reveals your aura to nearby survivors when you are injured. A cute inclusion, but I don't think it's a major feature. It's interesting that it isn't the medic that got self-care, but with such enhanced skills to care for others, hit and run just got even less viable. The Scout. Pseudo perks available are Hyper Object of Obsession Revival come Infectious Urban Evasion, Boosted and Reimagined Any Means Necessary, Boosted Alert, and Iron Will come Somewhat Fixated. The language to talk about these perks is tricky, but simply put, the Scout's signature Stalking the Killer power is retained. When you see a killer within 64 meters, you reveal their aura to all survivors across the map. This skill comes bundled with a bonus urban evasion for self and nearby friendlies, which I can't imagine will be that useful, but you never know. As I said before, urban evasion is overrated. But now the Scout has Yui Kumura's Any Means Necessary, but better. Every 60 seconds you can either reset a downed pallet or even repair a broken pallet from the ether. And like all recharging skills, it just recharges passively. Boosted Alert is exactly as it was, revealing killer auras on break for 6 seconds. Killers still have nowhere to hide come Crawl of Brine as base kits, so this will net a lot of value. And now the Scout has some loose parts in the final skill. How useful is it? It's rather niche, to be honest, but I'd say the Scout is definitely better than it was before. As I said on my other channel, it's an interesting quartet of types. And once again, let's not be too harsh towards any problems, real or perceived, because balancing is harder than our entitled community gives it credit for. Having said that though, I do have some concerns. The biggest is that the guide, in my humble opinion, has been overtuned and is making matches feel too fast for the killers. I escaped my first 4 matches no sweats, and the killer duo got between 0 to 3 kills. I then escaped my next 4 matches, and although this one was very close, Well done, Lara Croft. But then I escaped my next 4 matches as well, and one of them had me double tapped, then tunnelled, and Nia still got out to vote for Camilla Harris. Either way, I still escape, and my streak is unbroken. Is this because I'm some sort of god? Obviously, but we must entertain the possibility that the Survivor side now has it too easy. I theorise that hyper-gen rushing is the cause of this imbalance. Oh well, I suppose it could well sort out the queues. I kept playing, and stone the entity worshipping crows, I survived my next 4 matches as well. Either I'm unstoppable or it really is too easy with my 16 win streak. And I stole an item every time. How far can I go? 16. It's 16. I came afoul of formidably oppressive Blight and Billy combo, and that'll be all she wrote.
Your luck's run out.
But I still think there's something wrong with the newest version of 2v8. I voiced these concerns in my previous video on 2v8, which is still on my old serial killer channel. I've separated my gaming videos from my true crime videos, but I can't bring myself to delete that old video. 155 views, 3 likes and 3 comments might not be much to you, but for me, it has sentimental value. But now, let's take a much closer look at the 4 survivor classes. As we established from the intro, the Escapist no longer has the boosted made for this from the first time around. Although I'm sad to see it gone, I recognise its exclusion is healthy for the game. It was OP, and last time we all became familiar with the sight of being the 5th person in the lobby, and yet all 4 Escapist roles already being taken. And this shot is literally my first match now, so they're still beloved. But now the other 3 are more desirable, making who's the best class much more ambiguous than it was last time. Now we can work together and appeal to our strengths without being overpowered. At least in theory. Sprint Burst is usually an A tier perk and sits as an average exhaustion perk behind Lithe and Dead Hard and ahead of Balanced Landing and all the other crap. Like before, you can 99 your Sprint Burst to save it for when you really need it, but given the exhaustion penalty is only 20 seconds and there's no Mindbreaker or Blood Echo or anything like that, you probably won't need to rely on this strategy. The infectious aspect of Sprint Burst is again amazing. I still love the feeling of a group of us sprinting to the next gen or bolting away from an approaching killer like a group of whiny rabbits. And once again, it can be gifted to a teammate mid-chase to help them get out of a jam. I just love it. Now, although Quick and Quiet is a Meg Thomas perk and the Escapist class seems to use her as a template, I associate stealth perks, if you'll indulge me in considering it a stealth perk, more with the Scout class. But as is, you now have an activatable Q&Q on command. Use it at your own pleasure to do all sorts of silly plays in the 5 minutes before all the gens have been completed by the guides. Windows of Opportunity has the same massive utility it had last time despite the shorter range. As before, you can use it to queue loops ahead of time, exploiting the increased pallet spawn rate, making yourself a nightmare to catch. Also, the shorter range prevents the board being obscured, which I lightly complained about last time. The shorter range is a very simple solution to further clipping the former strongest class's wings, and I'm furious I didn't consider it the first time around. Oh well, can't be right about or predict everything. But even better, with the scouts in the background fixing up the pallets you waste, you'll be able to see the auras of the rebuilt pallets and keep any chase going on and on. Windows of Opportunity is also about what you don't see. It broadcasts lack of opportunity. See nothing? You're in a dead zone. Run somewhere else. It's just a very versatile perk that many players, including myself, rate highly. Despite, yes, it is a brain rot training wheels noob crutch. Sue me. The new self-care isn't very good, and this unlockable skill should be swapped with the medic's unlockable skill for consistency's sake more than anything. I've said what I wanted to say in the brief overview, but I'll repeat. The medic heals you 50% faster. You heal yourself at a 70% rate, so technically 30% slower. It's possible there are no medics within 128 meters of their empathy scan, but even a non-medic is better than doing it yourself. You have 7 teammates after all, why would you need this perk? I suppose you could just heal yourself in the medic's face to assert dominance and remind them that you don't need a nanny, but don't be surprised if they bear a grudge over that. The Escapist is a good choice against any killer really. Being hard to catch is useful for your team as you waste the killer's time. Even the ranged killers find hitting a speeding target harder. I suppose Trapper is the biggest cause of concern for you as you bolt into the prime jaws of another snap attack. However, you can still bully Wraiths with the Escapist class just like last time. They uncloak, then you and everyone around you is halfway across the board. They'll try to bait the sprint burst out of you before running you down, so I suggest playing chicken as they fake the uncloak. Have fun. The guide still has its special version of Better Together. It was never very useful for the reasons I laid out last time, and I stand by my previous work. Nevertheless, it might help your dozy teammates get cracking on the final gen, so I'd never say it was useless, even if you still don't get the aura reveal on a down as you would with the vanilla version. I do, however, question the usefulness of quieter gen repairs via Reimagined Technician, given you'll probably have at least another survivor near you, thus giving the killer something to see and thus negate any value you might get from hushed fixing. But again, you never know. It's something. The great skill check bonus progression remains, and it even has a lot of extras attached to it. One of them is the new Prove Thyself charge skill. There really isn't much to it, just press the button every 90 seconds to give everyone an 8% speed increase over 10 seconds. I'm not 100% clear exactly how many seconds are saved, but it's nothing to sniff at being triggered maybe 3 times with just one guide. It's gen rushing overdrive. I was worried about this and I voiced my concerns before. It looks like behaviour still haven't learnt the lesson from this. Now, it's still too early to tell, but I think this is going to be an issue this time around. I pray I'm wrong about it, but this 2v8 is so much easier for the survivor side. Blink and it's GG. I suppose missed skill checks is still an issue like it was before, but even with potato skippers, I think you'll be saving much more time than wasting it, so long as you do your assigned job. You chose to be a gen jockey, so make it work. Visionary is still underwhelming, but useful, with its new increased range to the default Visionary. So you've got no excuse if you're not rushing. And the deja vu effect of seeing the closest 4-gen auras is nice, but like so many other things in this updated iteration of 2v8, feels redundant. Killer duos are not going to try and 4-gen. There simply isn't enough time, and it's just not effective or practical. Hyper Specialist Thing is going to be the bane of every sober killer, making fast gens even faster. I will concede that the revised classes do a good job of playing to pre-existing strengths, but a bit too well if you ask me. Let's just be thankful this only activates after enduring 1 cage state. Maybe it should be 2. Ultimately, the guide is much stronger than before, but epitomises the boring but practical playstyle. Trappers will be punished given they'll set up their traps just as the last gen activates, but the typical killers with good map pressure will be the problem, and they will hunt you down by making a note of who's who in the lobby to try and slow the rush. I would. It's fitting that 2 of the new killers are especially nasty for guides. Blight and Spirit are high-tier hunters notorious for bringing the pressure, and with time being as tight as it is, they won't hold back. To a lesser extent, Hillbilly and Nurse will be issues as well, but between cooldowns, crashes and asthma attacks, their pressure isn't as oppressive as Talbot and Rin. But Junior and Sally are the more lethal classes at the killer side's disposal, so even now I wouldn't underestimate them. Overall, the medic has been changed the least, and has instead had all their numbers boosted. Their overall job remains the same as it was before, and I'd argue they're just as valuable now as they were then. The medic gets everyone fixed up and back into the grinder doing gens with a bare minimum of fuss. It's the survivor equivalent of regroup reset, and the team depends on it. People like being healed swiftly, then getting back to the action. You might say this is a boring but practical class as well, but at least you won't be holding M1 as long as the nerds that players guide. I'd say it's too useful now, and when a doc isn't nearby you feel the pain significantly more. I will go so far in this belief to suggest this. To any killer players who might be stalking me right now, listen up. I truly believe that if you notice there are no medics in the lobby, hit and run tactics just became viable. I felt this way before, and I certainly do now that medics have been buffed. Non-medics find healing other survivors a chore, and might put it off entirely if they're not trying to overcompensate for a lack of doctors on the board. Either way, they're more vulnerable. The guides won't be able to rush gens if they're being healed up or forced to play medic themselves and sluggishly heal their mates. I have a theory that this can slow down matches and give a good chance for bloody victory. How viable is it? I'll have to wait and see, but if there's at least one medic in the team, this strategy is even worse than it was before. Between the faster heals they perform and provoke others to perform, as well as the occasional insta-heal, all hit-and-run plays become completely nullified in the face of a single medic. The autodidact effect really is an amazing bonus, making injuries much less punishing than they were last time. Once again, I say empathy is a decent perk and should be utilised to keep everyone in fighting shape. It has further uses in that should you suddenly see an aura, you know where one of the killers is. Even just getting close to a wounded ally will at least enforce some iron will unto them, helping them stay hidden should that eventuality come up. The medic's unlockable skill is the most confusing to me. It's another perk that teeters on the realm of redundancy, but there's so much to it. Babysitter causes, amongst other things, an unhooked survivor to leave no scratch marks for a while. Empathic connection allows other survivors to see your aura when they're injured. Again, it does have other effects. This reimagined reverse babysitter meets reimagined reverse empathic connection pseudo-perk monstrosity will, upon receiving one cage state, prevent your scratch marks being revealed whenever you are in the wounded state, and will reveal your aura to other survivors when you are injured. It's yet another ace in the hole, and although certainly not useless, I'm just left thinking, is it really necessary? This would be a much better fit on the Escapist, and the medic should have the self-care. Would that make too much sense? Medic is already modelled on Claudette Morel, and if the medic can heal themselves, they can get to healing others with more confidence. When thinking about the Scout, the question at the forefront of my mind is, how useful is the signature skill? And I still struggle to answer that question. Does your team like you constantly calling out one of the killer locations? Is it more viable in the new era of Shadow and Fearmonk killer classes, which grant undetectable and bonuses when unseen? Or would your team rather you just fix a damn gen and stop wasting time? Well, at least it's not boring but practical. If anything, for the most part, it's interesting and impractical. But with guides being faster and more confident fixes on gens, I think they might appreciate having a read on a killer as much as possible. I suppose it all depends on who you ask. It's still useful for occasionally nullifying a mind game. The signature skill is also only really useful if you can easily stalk your intended target. Blight and Spirit will be hard to keep up with, thus putting you back on the gen. Similar applies to Hillbilly and Nurse. An early warning of their approaches could be a big deal though. Huntress gives herself away with her obsessive humming, but an early warning or call out that she's aiming can be a big help as well. But then there's the Wraith, who just made your skill next to useless. Given he'll spend half the match cloaked, you won't get to reveal him or even keep up with him or see where he's going. But contrast this to the Trapper. Stalking a trapper and calling out when and where he places his traps will completely nullify him. And then there's the Deathslinger. Despite being a lanky sort you'd notice in a pub, he does have a habit of sneaking up on you, and is very quiet on his approach. Also, as a 110% move speed killer, keeping a tail on him will be easier. You can really ruin his day. But now comes the bad news. I have a theory that old Caleb Quinn is actually the weak link this time around. He's just not suited to 2v8 without some serious pressure, so Scout having the edge against him isn't very helpful because you're probably gonna win anyway. And now I'm going to whine about urban evasion. I know when crouched you make less noise, but with Iron Will at your disposal after one hook that's not really relevant anymore. Urban evasion was only useful against executioner, hag and skull merchant, and even then in mostly niche moments. None of them are even available in 2v8, and maybe thank God for that, so urban evasion still feels like a total waste. Maybe it's somewhat useful against Nurse, who can't be checking for every corner you might creep behind, owing to the fact she's the slowest killer in the game and needs to get back to applying pressure. Maybe in some crazy situational moments you might save yourself or someone else with the infectious aspect of urban evasion, but otherwise this doesn't deserve this much attention. I do admit though, I like trailing the killers with my urban evasion. It makes me feel like the paparazzi. Every 60 seconds the scout can reset or even rebuild a pallet, which even now strikes me as bonkers. It's a nice and novel idea and a good tool to have in the scout's belt, but it's annoying you can only see restore auras when standing still though, and those auras should be a different colour so as not to confuse yourself WOO style. Boosted alert is just the same as it was before. I still don't rate vanilla alert, arguing that the information it gives you really isn't that useful, but it's slightly better in 2v8. It's important to remember there's no surge or ruin or pain resonance here, so killers will kick a lot more than they would in vanilla matches. They also want that nowhere to hide reveal, and I will say that when you see that aura, you have more of a chance to get out of nowhere to hide range and prevent your aura being revealed. Also, when you see the kick, you'll know where a regressing generator is that you can save. I liken this to a budget rookie spirit last time, and I still think it's pertinent. Of course, not much of this applies to the Wraith. Just fix up a few pallets for the Escapists and let them take care of business. Finally, we have the last pseudo perk, and it's a bit of a flop. I'm glad we finally have Iron Will after one hook state, and we make Medic's enforced Iron Will completely redundant, but it's not exactly a game changer. As for walking 25% faster, this might be the least necessary addition. I admit it's actually faster than Nancy's Fixated, which only puts walk speed up to 20%, but it's only 5% less of not having a point than it otherwise would be. Maybe there are some niche instances where faster walking can be useful, but otherwise, just run. As I said before, ultimately, it's all rather meh. Now comes the portion of the video where I ask myself, how can it be improved? Last time I extolled the virtues of humility in the light of me not being a professional game designer, and yet I was still mostly right, so now I'm going to pursue a line of arrogance, because I'm a smug clown. The Escapist. Wary of power creep, I still wanted this class to stay as it was. I mean, if you wanted to attract more survivors, the revival made for this was a hell of a draw, even if it was a bit much. The class doesn't feel as badass as it used to, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. I still don't like the name though. All of them are trying to escape, so forget it. The Guide. I was worried about gen speeds and tiny changes having huge consequences. I even mentioned Prove Thyself by name last time around because I knew there was a risk of making gen rushing too much. How does it look now? It's still too early to tell definitively, but I'll make the case now that gens just go too fast in the new 2v8. I'm not surprised I didn't get my troubleshooter or wiretap skill suggestions. Wiretap would probably be an insult to the scouts anyway. But as Guide stands now, I think the back pocket Prove Thyself should only charge every 180 seconds as opposed to 90 seconds, and the unlockable free charges skill should be diminished somewhat. I'll be watching this one closely. The Medic. I had wanted the healing leader range tweaked from 3 meters to 4 meters, but behaviour just went full 8 meters. All allies within 8 meters heal 50% faster. I respect their boldness, and maybe I should have proposed the same, but I was too scared of radical change. And I'm still not convinced this isn't too much. We don't need to revive botany knowledge's secondary effect anymore, but I'm rather upset that items still don't play a bigger role in this mode. and I still think the medics and the escapists' unlockable skills should be swapped over. It just makes more sense. Regardless, I feel the medic is in a mostly good place right now. The Scout. I strongly feel their boosted any means necessary ability should only charge up when they reveal a killer's aura to their team, and not passively on its own. To counterbalance, only 30 seconds of reveal is necessary to charge any means necessary as opposed to 60. That aside, this class is okay. In all honesty, overall, I like the classes all better than last time, but the overall experience is actually slightly weaker. But what are my final thoughts this time? I still stand by my idea for a 5th survivor class in the Artisan as laid out in my previous video, and I love all the new maps that have been added, and I'm glad no indoor maps have been added. Although I'm one of those loony survivors that actually likes indoor maps, they're bad for Billy, Huntress, and maybe Trapper as well. And speaking of Hillbilly, congratulations on getting the Instadown back. I thought it was silly you didn't have that last time, but back then slugging was a major cause for concern. And that's it. Please leave a comment, it will really make my day, and what am I doing with my life?